Hello and welcome back to HEMA Fight Breakdowns. Today we're going to be breaking down something that is technically in the treatises, I think Fiore specifically, and it's what I'm going to call essentially the drive-by pommel. It is a very particular technique in that I believe it's something that isn't really specifically a pommel strike, but it is about basically whenever two people who are both coming forward at the same time clash and meet in the middle. There's always that scramble for hand and positional control. And this is a very particular technique that I believe shouldn't really be considered a pommel strike in the same way that other pommel strikes are considered, up and down with force, damaging blows, but more of a positional thing.
No score.
So in this exchange, what you'll see here is Cheney, I'm not even going to bother pretending I don't know who, lands a little bit of a Scheitelhau right over the top of the guard here. But specifically what I'm talking about is this interaction right here. So right here happens all the time between two people who are just moving forward and throwing cuts. Generally what happens is they've both thrown Oberhaus at each other. In this case, we're just ignoring the fact that whether or not anything landed. But this follow-up is very important to pay attention to because as two human bodies with momentum and weight clash, there's a lot of different things that can happen. And what you see here is a very, very common interaction. One, as you see Arto doing here, he releases his left hand and he immediately tries to get control over Cheney's arms. If this was a best case scenario, what would basically happen is he'd withdraw his own right arm, pull down both of Cheney's arms with his left arm, and try to get him into a hold where he can free up his sword and hit him back. But something very interesting happens here. The second this clash happens, instead of releasing with any one hand, Cheney essentially frames with his arms and his sword and his pommel against the face of Arto's mask and pushes his head back. And what you see happen here is that this is in a way its own form of defensive framing. So just to be clear here, Cheney's a very tall man. And as a result, his shoulder line is in line with most people's heads, which makes this slightly more advantageous. But it is worth pointing out that there is a principle of longsword, especially in this clash that happens, which is the first person to gain a positional advantage often is the one who's going to keep it throughout the entire grappling exchange. So whenever you have a two-handed weapon and both of your hands are on that weapon, there is a bit of a problem. Whenever you have this high line bind, your arms are in front of your head. And the only thing that you can do is pull them up or push them down. But in both of those cases, you will be giving up a superior position. And the best case scenario is to keep your arms short, close to your body, and framed in such a way that you have a best case of resisting the impact of your opponent running into you. So the other problem here is that if you keep your arms directly where they are, you cannot throw a follow-up strike as long as your hands and your opponent's hands are pushing against each other. As you watch and see right here, if there was any attempted zwerk, cut, thrust, nothing is happening from here, from either person. The swords are completely taken out of the equation. The arms are completely bound up with each other. And again, because these are two people with force and momentum going forward, this clash is inevitable. But what you can decide is where your momentum and where your force is going to keep you safe and to keep you in a good positional point when this clash immediately happens. Arto's hands go too high. And I think, again, that's because Cheney's very tall and he just naturally had his hands up a little bit higher to try to engage with Cheney's blade. But as they clash together, because his arms are too high, Cheney's able to just kind of blow straight through the triangle made by his two raised arms and is able to get what would be two very, very strong overhooks. And there's a problem with this. Because look at where Arto's body is in comparison to his structure and his legs. Right as they clash, they're both leaned forward. They both have their legs underneath of them. They both have their forward momentum. But as this happens, this particular structure here with the two arms and the grip held right in front of your opponent's face does a great job of breaking the posture of the other person. Now, at the beginning of this, I was talking about pommel strikes and Fiore. And I believe there is a play in Fiore where if you both meet here at some sort of grappling distance, what you are supposed to do is sort of dip your sword to your right, throw your pommel around the right side, and try to hit somebody in the face. And I believe this is the play where Fiore says you're supposed to knock exactly like 4 teeth out or some crap like that. But while this isn't that exact play, I believe that it follows a lot of the same conceptual beats as that play. Because whenever two people bind very heavily in the middle and their momentum is going forward, there is very good reason and a lot of advantage to be gained by basically pushing your pommel into your opponent's face as a method of gaining structure and dominance over this clash that happens whenever two people run into each other. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, as your pommel or your blade or your grip or just your hands go into somebody's face, you force them to break their posture. Their posture meaning their ability to keep their legs under their hips under their shoulders, and their shoulders under their head, and their head under their arms. All of which line up in a nice even row in a grapple to prevent someone from pushing you backwards. By pushing into their head, you snap back their neck a little bit, which makes their shoulders stay still, which allows their hips and their legs to continue to move forward unintentionally this couple inches to find that your hips are no longer over your legs, your hips are no longer under your shoulders, and now your neck is back past your shoulders and your arms are just dangling out here in space unsupported. What this means is that you no longer have your lats engaged, you no longer have your core engaged in keeping your arms tight to your body, which means reaching all the way out and trying to exert some sort of force or power is going to be much harder. Think about, trying to move a 20-pound weight with your arm fully extended versus with it right next to your body. Your ability to move your body and just use your arms as kind of like extensions of your body is what gives you that core strength and allows you to use all of your body to move something. So by breaking your opponent's posture, you give them an extremely disadvantageous position in a grapple. And it means that a lot of the things that a lot of people would try to do from here are no longer going to work. If Ardo tries to pull down Cheney's arms, he's going to find that he can't do it. He has no structure. All he's doing is pulling down with just one arm against someone's entire body. And it's just not going to work out. Also, you'll find that Cheney's right arm, despite being right here in the way of Ardo's left hand, he's still going to be able to push through and free his arms and still rotate them both. Because he has that positional advantage, and even though right here, as Ardo tries to take control over Cheney's arm, he can't pull him anywhere because everything is framed right here. So right now, in this particular position, neither person can really do anything. But I believe that there is another thing that needs to be considered when doing this, because I do not consider this situation to be neutral. Despite the fact that right here, you might think that Ardo's at a bit of a disadvantage. By the time the next couple frames happen, he's gotten his legs up under him, he's gotten his frame back, he's gotten everything back. But there is still another disadvantage to be leveraged here, and that is the fact that Cheney still has both of his arms in a position to tie up Ardo's dominant hand. This left arm can basically prevent you from doing anything meaningful with your right hand, but this right hand is zoned out by that very same arm. And what can happen here is, I believe, that pommel strike from Fiore. Because in this particular position, what can happen is that leveraging the fact that Cheney has both arms on his sword and Ardo only has one on his and one on Cheney's one arm, he can pull up and down and leverage his pommel in a way that is advantageous to him. Basically, he can pull up and down and work the frame that Ardo has put himself in, the position that Ardo has put himself in, to free his sword and continue to either pommel strike or throw strikes. Whereas Ardo, because he hasn't actually managed to free his dominant arm yet, has to commit everything to freeing that arm and just trying to tie up Cheney as best as possible. So to go over it just one more time, the specific technique involved here is right here. Right as the clash happens, you want to frame with your hands and the grip and maybe your pommel try to direct it towards the face or the top of the head of your opponent. Get this good position, and from here, move into a grappling play that you're comfortable with. Whether that be pommel striking, freeing up the right arm, something. Because if you have positional advantage when this scramble starts to happen, even the ability of somebody to grapple your dominant arm and try to make the situation more neutral is going to be much more difficult, because your hands, both of them at first and then just one, will have been pushed behind your head, and you won't be able to do much from that. All right, that's going to be it for today. If you'd like to see your own footage featured on the channel, feel free to send me an email over at HEMAFightBreakdowns@gmail.com, and I hope to see you next time.